How'd you like to listen to .NET Rocks with no ads? Easy. Become a patron. For just $5 a month, you get access to a private RSS feed where all the shows have no ads. $20 a month will get you that and a special .NET Rocks patron mug. Sign up now at patreon.netrocks.com.
Hey, Carl and Richard here. As you may have heard, NDC is back, offering their incredible in-person conferences around the world. And we'd like to tell you about them. NDC Copenhagen is happening August 27th through the 31st. Go to ndccopenhagen.com for more information.
NDC Porto is happening October 16th through the 20th. Go to ndcporto.com to register.
And check out the full lineup of conferences at ndcconferences.com.
Hey there. This is Jeff Fritz, the purple blazer guy from Microsoft, letting you in on a little secret about my friend Carl Franklin. You know, the guy who started .NET Rocks, the first podcast about .NET. In 2002, the guy who's been teaching Blazor on YouTube since 2020. Yeah, that Carl Franklin. Well, Carl's joined up with the folks from Code in a Castle to teach a week-long hands-on Blazor class at, are you ready? Get this, at a castle/villa in Tuscany. It's sort of a luxury vacation with Blazor learning built in. Carl's calling it the Blazor Master Class. You'll learn Blazor from the ground up, finishing the week with the ability to build and deploy Blazor applications. Since the training happens for only 4 hours in the morning over 6 days, you can bring your significant other, your partner with you, and you should, right? This part of Italy is absolutely beautiful. There's so much to see and do, and Larry and Marco from Code in a Castle are organizing daily activities both at the castle and in the area. The castle is in the Maremma, a less touristed region of Tuscany, offering both classic Tuscan hill country as well as easy access to the Etruscan Riviera with sublime local food, wine, and olive oil around every corner. Breakfast is included every day. There will be 2 communal dinners at the castle bookending the experience, and most other meals and all activities are included. And did I mention you'll learn Blazor in person from Carl Franklin? Listen, space is limited and for very good reason. This is quality training in a beautiful setting. Go to codeinacastle.com/Blazor2023. That's BLAZOR 2023 to take advantage of this amazing opportunity to join Carl in Tuscany for an unforgettable week of La Dolce Vita while advancing your programming skills in this important new technology.
Hey, guess what? It's .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin.
And I'm Richard Campbell.
And you're here again. Isn't that cool? They're here again. Yeah. They show up.
This keeps happening.
I don't know. I don't know why.
I'm beginning to get an idea why.
Yeah, maybe. How you been, Mr. Campbell? How's moving going?
I'm packing mostly, right? But and the problem, of course, is that we're not moving into a new place.
Yeah.
We're moving into a place that we've already furnished.
Yeah.
So we have entirely too much of everything, not the least of which is a downsize. So 20-something years of being in this house, it's a lot of purging.
Yard sale?
No, not a yard sale kind of guy. You know, that's not the thing. I admit I will Facebook Marketplace like good bits of electronics and things that but it's only good for free.
Yeah.
If you, as soon as there's a price, forget it. You're wasting your time.
Yeah.
But if you want to get rid of something on a weekend quickly, you can stick it in the driveway and throw it on Facebook Marketplace. It'll be gone in an hour.
And if you say you want $10 for it, somebody's going to offer you 2.
Well, they won't even do that. It's just, all they'll do is waste time after that. If you give it away, it's gone, and that's fine. Unless it's something nice, in which case they go, oh, it's a scam.
So if there are any .NET Rocks listeners in your area, can they contact you and see what you got? Do you have a list somewhere?
I don't really have a list. We kind of, stuff comes along and it goes out the door pretty quickly. But,
okay.
Yeah, it's not that organized. Too much stuff, man.
Too much stuff.
And, but a lot of what's happening right now is, and you know my wife well enough to know that she purchased a particular size of plastic bin with locking lids and stacking mounts.
Oh, yeah.
And so packaging up the things that need to stay into these bins. We have measured off the space in the garage up on the coast. And so we know how many bins we're allowed to have, and we're sort of making it fit to the space. And so I keep doing runs in the truck up there and continuing to pile up a monolith, something out of Pink Floyd's The Wall. And eventually this will be done.
Wait a minute. That's part of what we're talking about, monoliths today, right? With Layla? So I wonder why you use that word.
Do you? You like that callback.
All right. Well, before we get Layla on, let's do Better Know Framework, because I got something really kind of interesting to share.
All right. Okay, man, what do you got?
So this is a story reported by The Verge.
Right.
Millions, in quotes, of sensitive U.S. military emails were reportedly sent to the country of Mali due to a typo.
Right.
For over 10 years, I won't read the whole thing, but here's the gist. For over 10 years, millions of emails associated with the U.S. military have been getting sent to Mali, a West African country allied with Russia, due to a typo, according to a report from the Financial Times. Instead of appending the military's .mil domain to their recipient's email address, people frequently type .ml, the country identifier for Mali.
I mean, presumably all these emails bounce.
Well, here's the story. So this guy, a Dutch entrepreneur, Johannes Zurbier, probably something like that, contracted to manage Mali's domain, tells the Financial Times this has been happening for over a decade, despite his repeated attempts to warn the U.S. government. And when he began noticing requests for non-existent domains like army.ml and navy.ml, he set up a system to catch the misdirected emails, which was, quote, rapidly overwhelmed and stopped collecting messages. He reportedly intercepted 117,000 misdirected emails, some of which contained sensitive information. Oh, my goodness.
Yep, that's a good one.
Attention to detail, kids. It's really important.
Well, and I mean, again, I guess they mostly bounced.
Yeah.
But the real point, I think, is at the end of this story where it's like that now the Defense Department has set it up so that when any .mil domain email address tries to send to .ml, they get a message that says, you need to verify this.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I just don't understand why somebody would send army to army.mil and then get a bounce notice and then keep sending it.
Well, who knows if they did?
Well, who knows if they did?
There's a lot of people working in the military.
Yeah, you're right.
Right. And I mean, I bet you some of those emails are, hey, want to meet for lunch? Right.
Could be, yeah.
I'm just guessing.
Yeah. But there was some sensitive stuff. Anyway, it's very important to pay attention to details.
Sanitize your inputs.
That's the moral of the story.
Pretty funny.
All right. So who's talking to us today, Richard?
Gravity Comment Off Show 1770, which is back in December 21 when we talked to our friend Paul Yukonowitz about building microservices with Dapper.
Yep.
And Sean Kieran wrote this great comment. Admittedly,
DAPR, Dapper.
DAPR, yes, because too many product names. Life's hard.
Yeah.
So it's about 18 months ago. Sean wrote this great comment. He says, thanks for another great show. I don't know how you managed to keep coming up with them. Awesome work. I enjoyed listening to Paul talk about Dapper. It's a really interesting technology and seems to have great hosting support too. And Paul mentioned that Dapper makes service discovery easier, which is great to hear. But the words service discovery, in quotes, also makes me shy away a little as it seems to be a bag full of unnecessary complexity that comes along with the modern approach to microservices. And I'm with him. Like, generally speaking, I think service discovery seems vaguely silly. It's like, I kind of know where I want to call. Why do I need to discover it? Until you're dealing with uncoupled failover solutions, right? The whole idea that rather than saying, hey, when you need this service, call here. It's like, when you need this service, ask for this. Most of the time it would be the thing we always thought it would be, but I can also have a backup one there and I can upgrade. I can, change things around without having to recompile other code.
Sure.
Right? This is that sort of uncoupling approach, but I agree that service discovery can be easily abused.
It reminds me of the old XML web services days. Wasn't there a discovery protocol?
I mean, even going back to ASMX, right? For crying out loud. Like, we've always had this idea of we want to ask by name for something, not by location.
I just remember they did a demo where you could search like zip code services, and all the web services that provided zip codes would come up with endpoints.
Right. And that was the silly one. The one where it's silly. Like, I just want to call out into the internet for a service to do something. Yeah. And it's like, I'm pretty sure you should never do that.
Never, ever do that.
This is not a good idea. The internet is not filled with your friends. That's what's out there.
That was just, to prove it could be done, I suppose.
Yeah. And again, didn't make it a good idea.
No.
But within a service architecture, to be able to be, to request a particular class of service and not care that it's any given instance in any given location.
It's kind of like the Swagger idea, right?
That's all in the same. It's along the same line. It's that uncoupling.
Yeah.
Now, Sean does go on to say he got involved with service buses back in 2008. So he's obviously an old schooler when he started with N-Service Bus.
Yeah.
Which we know and love well.
Yep.
But he also switched over to Rebus, which I don't think we've ever talked about, developed by Mogen Heller-Kreis.
No, we have not. I don't think so.
No. But then also mentions things like Mass Transit, EasyNetQ, Brighter. Like, there is a bunch of solutions there. There's no two ways about it. And makes this key point. He says, when you build with these systems, you're making true, he calls them true Microsoft services, which I think is a bit optimistic, but it is the idea that here is a platform that encourages you to go down the path of separate services that can be worked on different developers, deployed independently, can support multiple versions, running on the same service at the same time in production without having to worry about it. And that the way they do communication is schema based. Like, it's all those sort of core ideas. And today, then you have that abstraction of transport. So it might be RabbitMQ or SMS or Azure Service Bus today, or even Amazon's SQS. Like, there's lots of different ways to do stuff. And that's the key to the power of all these service bus architectures, that you don't have to commit to any given stack, and changing those things is not that big of a deal. Anyway, I thought it was a nice love letter about service buses, but it's also, I think, a luxury for a lot of folks. Like, it takes a very significant set of decision making to decide we're going to implement a set of applications, which is really what we're talking about, an overall solution suite in a service bus model. And I don't think we're going to talk about that today, because I think most people don't start there. I think most folks build an application and get to a place where they now are told, if only we'd built this as microservices, everything will be good.
Right. Tear it all down.
Start over. Which I've come to appreciate. The main advantage of that approach is that it means you'll be left alone for 6 months while you are mired and re-architected. All I really want to do is stop coming to this meeting. If I say this, can I stop coming to this meeting?
See you in 6 months.
That's what it works. Hey, Sean, thank you so much for your comment. I thought it was super relevant to our show today. And a copy of Music to Code By is on its way to you. And if you'd like a copy of Music to Code By, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com or on the Facebooks. We publish every show there. And if you comment there and I read it on the show, we'll send you a copy of Music to Code By.
And you can follow us on Twitter. That's fine. But the real fun is happening over on Mastodon right now. I'm Carl Franklin at techhub.social.
And I'm Rich Campbell at mastodon.social. And is the real fun happening at Mastodon?
I think it's...
Or is it now happening at Threads?
No, it's happening at Mastodon right now, for me anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know. Are you on Threads yet?
I had to sign up with it. I'm one of the 100 million in 5 days.
Yeah, me too.
It's because we all had Instagram accounts, right? So it's not a big deal to flip across.
I never had all that many Instagram followers anyway.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
If your Instagram good, then your Thread's going to be good. And if your Instagram not good, your Thread's not going to be so good. And
yeah,
are we really looking to Zuckerberg to be the savior of anything?
No, actually, no, thanks.
No, not at all.
Yeah, anyway, I've already given on.
I got a Blue Sky account too. Me and
I'm going to try that.
Both my
next.
friends.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, let's bring on Layla Porter. Layla is a developer advocate at VMware, serving the .NET community. She makes videos and live codes on YouTube. She's a Microsoft MVP, a GitHub star, Progress Ninja, and the founder of the hashtag Women of .NET initiative. Layla loves sharing knowledge whilst having fun. No question is stupid, and beginners are always welcome. And you are always welcome here on .NET Rocks, Layla. Welcome back.
Hello. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, it's English when you hear the word whilst.
Whilst.
We're the only ones who can pull that word off.
Yeah.
Nobody else can drop a whilst and mean it.
I can't say just while.
No,
Unless I'm whiling away the time.
Oh,
Otherwise, it's whilst.
That's a while without an H. That's a whole other while.
That's it. So, that's the only time you'll hear me say while.
Okay. Fair
enough.
Appreciate
I think the last time we talked was at NDC somewhere, wasn't it?
I don't know. This is my third appearance.
like that. Oh, we did the .NET Foundation show.
That
right.
was it.
So and that was just an interesting time, as I recall.
Mm-hmm. Quite interesting.
I have not. The foundation's still out there. Things seem a little more peaceful, which is not much of an achievement. But if there's anything I can say about the foundation, it's like I appreciate the focus on the open source leaders, project leaders these days. I think it's wise and something important going on in our industry right now. But that was like almost 3 years ago. So we're probably due for dragging some foundation folks into the loop and having a conversation.
Well, they've just got some new directors, 3 new directors now. So now is the time. As did I.
Yeah.
So what's on your mind today, Layla?
Well, there's a lot of things on my mind, but I guess the past 2 years, because it's been 2 years now since I joined VMware, it's been thinking about microservices. So you talking about all of that just now was very relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really steep learning curve. And I can only imagine how steep it is for folks who are actually doing the thing and moving across to microservices. So I thought we could have a little chat about that and how I don't like microservices and would urge people to shy away unless they absolutely really, really have to.
You are not alone. In fact, the sentiment from our most recent guests is, do you really need this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is sort of I'm not going to say it's a lashback, but anything that it falls into that one right way category gets pushed back on, and with good reason.
Yeah. And usually by the people that try it, and it just seems to complicate things and slow things down.
And that it does.
Yeah. The question is, does it get you anything? Like, I have certainly worked on service bus architectured applications because they were complex enough with enough different stacks and enough different development teams that conscious upcoupling to work through a bus became essential. Otherwise, this gigantic multimodal app resonated with each other. We couldn't ship anything, but not that many applications are like that.
No.
Well, buses and queues are a good idea, even if you don't have a big or complex thing. I mean, that's just it's a nice synchronous tool.
Yeah. If that's something you need.
Yep.
But where are you coming at from Layla? Who are the frustrated devs?
I found that at work, a lot of the people I was speaking to were advocating hard for microservices. So it's something that I really had to look into and learn more about architecting. And the more I looked into it and the more I spoke to people, the more I saw that people were getting really drowned in the complexity of it all.
Right.
And I think that, as you say, there were some loud voices saying there's a particular way of doing something and it's a one size fits all. But really, when you're getting up to that scale and that type of enterprise application, it's really bespoke. And I think it has to be a pragmatic approach. And there was far too much dogma for my liking.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that a double whammy? It's not only that microservices is the way, but this form of microservices is the way.
Mm-hmm. And most of the customers that I speak to are, if we're lucky, they're on .NET Framework with a spaghetti tangle of code. A lot of them are still on classic ASP.
Wow.
Jeez.
And yeah, they have hundreds of applications, internal applications running on Classic. And how do you get them from going from that mindset to this big deal of microservices? And do they need it?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
Is there a litmus test? Is there a few questions you can ask yourself to determine whether this is a good idea or not?
My general thing is if you can't answer yes straight away, then the answer is no. That's kind of my going on it.
Right.
If I say, do you think you need microservices? And they go, well, we heard it's a good idea, blah, blah. I stop them there because
we heard,
or my CTO thinks it's a good idea. We want it. Or the worst thing is resume development, resume driven development. I hear that a lot. We want to try it. And then the complexity that it adds is just not worth it. Also, if the teams aren't big enough, that's a big issue. I think you need to have a big enough development team to be able to pull it off. Otherwise, everyone's going to be run ragged trying to manage this service or that service.
I've seen customers, Layla, that feel that they need to do it to sort of be ready for the inevitability that their application is going to become the next Facebook or the next Twitter or some sort of like uber popular, when in fact it's just another company,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
I hear that a lot as well.
We want to be ready.
And the funny thing being that the Twitters and the Facebooks didn't do that and were successful and then retrofitted into it, which is far more realistic.
Yeah.
And I think there's really good design decisions that one can make at the beginning of application development or through application development that will enable that transition at a later date. And that's what I advocate for. I think architecting your applications in a way such as that when you need to, if way down the road that you actually need to go distributed or part distributed, it will be easier. And that's what I try to sort of teach nowadays.
I think you sort of dropped a Yagni on me.
Yet another.
You ain't going to need it.
Oh, you ain't going to need it. That's right. You ain't going to need it. I couldn't remember that one.
Yeah. Hey, I had to double check, but classic ASP only went out of long-term support in December of 21.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And the original version was 1996. So that was 25 years. But, to me, and I think to all of us, when you said that, it's like, it's crazy that anybody would still be using classic ASP, but it's like, it's only it's fully out of support for the past almost 2 years, but still okay.
Talk about spaghetti code.
Wow, man.
I have nightmares about that stuff.
I mean, the enterprise architect in me thinks about that for a moment and would point them at Power Apps. Because odds are that's the kind of software they're building internally are forms over data apps. And I would want to go to the domain experts and say, hey, you're tired of using this. Let me set you up with this tool and sort of go from there. I certainly don't think microservices from there. The idea of looking at a classic ASP app and going, you know what, to fix this? Microservices.
Oh my God, that's like the new title of a horror movie, honestly. That's awful. But I do hear it.
Like it's such a titanic leap. It's just stunning. You're literally talking about nothing but code behind.
Yeah.
Right? Like one of ASP's big limitations was the lack of architecture. Like it was so hard to separate concerns at all in there. And now you're going into something that, and you've already pointed this out, microservices serves very well when the teams are big and plentiful and that we need a lot of architecture so these folks can work together. That makes a lot of sense. Odds are the folks operating and maintaining these ASP apps are one or two people that have ever touched that app, probably ever.
Yeah.
We heard horror stories, didn't we, Richard, about people who followed a particular, like very granular architecture for services. Everything was a service. And this was a very well-known author that had this book and was consulting. And they ended up, it ended up costing them millions of dollars because it was not only a waste of time, but it slowed everything down and there was no way to make it go faster. Just completely over-architected. Yeah.
And I've heard stories now of companies going backwards, that they're taking out their microservices and reconsolidating applications just because it's just wildly out of control.
Right.
And I think it's just the developer experience when you start going into these big systems that are distributed is awful. You don't always know where the errors are coming from unless you've put in great documentation that your testing is up to scratch. And I mean, we all know that when you've got a PM or a CTO breathing down your neck and saying, we need this yesterday,
right,
that some of those things are put on a back burner. And, I'll get to that and I'll implement that at some stage when it all quietens down, and then it never, ever gets implemented.
Yeah. And you need all that. The point here is the ceremony around all of this is important to it.
It is.
It can't be optional.
And I don't hear you saying that there should be no separation of concerns, because there clearly has to be. But you need just enough to make it work, and don't go overboard.
That's it.
And then finding that balance is kind of hard. But it seems like, I can think of maybe 3 or 4 silos that a big application would want to be in, right? Reporting, services, maybe, communication, email, that kind of stuff. But then I also find that, I don't know if I'm going to get hate mail over this, but some of the DDD people have sort of contributed to this, but domain driven, meaning, all right, let's get, find our domains and circle them out, and these are going to map to services. What do you think of that? Am I crazy?
Well, I'm really glad you brought that up, Carl, because one of the things I keep coming up against is everything to do with microservices seems to lead you to DDD. And I think that is a completely different way of thinking. And I like to say I steal just enough DDD to be dangerous. But I actually think I steal just enough DDD to get on and code what I need to code. And the main thing I take away from DDD is just high cohesion least coupling. That's the main thing I take away, which I think is any sort of principle, is the main principle that you want to think about when you are designing your application, and thinking about that separation of concerns.
And again, you're talking about a certain threshold of complexity to even be concerned about that. The app is big enough that it needs a separation of concerns.
Yes, I would say it has to have that critical mass for you to actually be worried about modularizing it and going down the modular monolith, which I'm a big fan of. And
it's a great term.
I love it. And that really does feel like the Wild West when I've been researching the right way. And I do that in finger quotes, to do a modular monolith. There are so many different opinions. There's no real guidelines. I found that was a really under talked about area. There was very little information on that. A few YouTube videos, a few people speaking loudly about it, but then it always had that DDD overtone, or DDD undertone, I should say. And I didn't want to go that way. So the past, 8 months, I've been researching on how to do that, trial and error, and coming up with an interesting way to architect it. And it's all just big chunks. And I think that's trying to keep the complexity as low as possible, but make it in such a way that you can break off these little satellites of applications if you need to, if you need that scale.
Well, and I appreciate that term that you're breaking off. So you're already coming from the angle of you have built a monolith because that's the default.
Yep.
Right? That we tend to just keep adding things to that our applications need over time. And eventually you have a problem. But the always question is like, what's the problem? Is it resonance? Like it's a big deal to make a change to anything because it affects so many other things? Or I often, being the scaling guy, ran into the scaling problem where it's like, it is very costly to scale this monolith just because one set of services in it needs to run many more instances.
That makes sense. Your asynchronous things become services, and those things can scale up and down as needed. Yep. That makes sense to me.
So chipping pieces out of the monolith, is that the fair term?
I would say so. I really like to think of them as satellites. And the one I always use as an example is like a notification service. You can have that in your monolith, but let's just say you want to bulk send emails or something like that. You may have that sporadically and you don't need it all the time. So it's a perfect thing to shove onto an Azure function or an AWS Lambda and just have that scale as and when you need it. But if you have that as a module in your modular monolith, it's just so easy to, as you say, Richard, chip that off,
right?
Throw it into something else, and connect to that with ease. Easy. And have your system still a monolith. You haven't got that added complexity of everything's distributed. And I think that's the middle ground where I think most companies and most applications need to sit. But there seems to be this polar divide and these two camps. No, we're sitting in this big ball of mud monolith over here because we don't want to go that route.
And we love it. We're happy.
That's it. We're in our mud pit, covered in mud, and we're so happy.
Get your Docker out of here.
Yep. And then we have the distribute everything camp over there, where every little tiny thing is a service. And now we've got minimal APIs, and there's like a million minimal API applications. And
but aren't both of these lies? I mean, really, nobody has one monolith. There's always some services extraneous, and nobody has a perfect set of microservices. There's always at least some ball of mud somewhere.
Oh, it's hidden.
I'd call it a ball of goo.
Yes.
It's more than mud.
But it's like, it's
worse.
You shouldn't be embarrassed that you have one. The only question is, do you know where yours is?
Right. Do you know where your ball of goo is?
Mud is? Because if you don't, that's a concern.
That's a big problem.
Right.
Right.
So all there is in this world is people who know where their balls of mud are and people who are lying.
Hey guys, let's take a break. We'll continue this great discussion with Layla Porter after these very important messages. And we're back. It's .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin. That's my friend Richard Campbell.
Howdy.
And this is our friend Layla Porter, and she's quoting blasphemy here. Blasphemy. I'm shocked.
Good. Shocked and awed and horrified all together.
What do you mean, Good. No microservices?
Or maybe only one.
Yeah.
Just a couple.
A couple is fine. You know, microservices, the word itself, implies that the whole thing just get split up into all these little pieces. And that's, you know, when you say, oh, we have a couple of microservices, then people will look at you cross-eyed. What do you mean, couple of microservices?
We call them Bob and Doug.
Yeah.
And they sit in the corner.
Yeah. I like your word, satellites. We have these satellites that
is a good term.
That do specific things. And they're
I know that there is an architecture term that they call it a citadel, but that doesn't resonate with me. And so I've really hung on to this for the past few years, this idea of the satellites orbiting my monolith. Mm-hmm. And I do want to say that when I say monolith, people think it's like a negative thing.
Right.
They get really touchy about it. Like, we've got a monolith, but, you know, we're looking to distribute it. We want to spread it out. Like, people are going to judge them because they've got a monolith or that they're outdated. Yeah. And it's like the word legacy. There's nothing wrong with a well-architected and well-maintained legacy application.
Especially if it's making money.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, crying all the way to the bank.
Yeah. Yep, it's written in VB. Shut up.
Yeah.
So I think there's all this negativity around this space, and there doesn't need to be. And I think monoliths are definitely where every application should start. And I think there needs to be a well-considered good plan for how that application is going to grow. And I think it comes down to people. And it's not the code, it's always the people. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is you have the visionary, the architect, and they do it all beautifully, and the application has started with best intentions. Because I'm sure no one out there has gone out to architect a big ball of mud or a spaghetti tangle. I can't think of anyone who would intentionally architect something like that. So I believe people are going with good intentions, but how does one...
But keeping all the services together in a deployment is actually efficient.
Yes.
It's fast. It interops well. It deploys easily. Like, there's a lot of reasons to do that. I didn't make a mistake. That was the sensible thing to do until something changes.
Absolutely. And I think it's where things go wrong is when that architect leaves or they retire or you get the new hires in and they're not onboarded correctly, or there is no design document or style guide. And I think that's where...
When too much of that architecture was in that person's head.
That's it.
Yeah.
And it's that, what is it? The bus prevention theory, hit by a bus thing, or some term.
Or can't take a vacation, or like when you take 2 weeks off, a whole bunch of stuff just stops until you get back.
Or worse, it carries on without your vision and oversight. And now you've got whole new services that are duplicating things. You've got this, and I'm talking about services within an application, not microservices. Right. So you've maybe got some different new interfaces, or people are doing weird things with dependencies, and you just get this, concerns are getting tangled. There's no separation. We're getting this cross-contamination of those clear boundaries that should be in place. And I think this comes down to something I only recently discovered, and that's architecture tests. I didn't know that was a thing until I started researching this. Wow. And it seems like a silly thing not to realize that it was there, but you can put in a whole load of architecture tests that make sure that the architecture you put into your application is being adhered to. And that can be like different projects aren't referencing projects they shouldn't be. And it just seems so logical to me. And in all the years I've done TDD and testing, this has never come up. Never once.
Unit tests to validate you're adhering to an architectural practice.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a good idea.
And I'd never heard of it.
I'm trying to conceptualize how that even works.
Well, there's a framework called architecture.net, I believe. I think that's the name of it. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But it is a series of unit tests that check for architecture adherence. And I had never seen it. And when you start looking into it, it makes perfect sense. And what assembly can reference what assembly.
Sure.
You can get quite in depth with it.
Okay, I get it now. So you're using reflection a lot to figure out how these things are coupled or decoupled or not coupled, and what calls what, and making a code map. And okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And it doesn't seem like something that you would write tests for. Maybe you would just tell it what the guidelines are, what are... And it would run a test and say, okay, here are your problems as I see them.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I thought it was pretty cool because something that I've come up against when I was in engineering was that there were so many different places to do the same thing. I worked on a .NET Framework app that was 15 years old, and you didn't know where to add something in because it could be in one of n number of places. And there were, 10, 12 different projects within this application. And you didn't know where anything was going to go. And that is where so many applications are, because they all sort of grow over time. And that's the whole point. It's a development process. It doesn't just magic up overnight. So, when people don't hang around jobs that long. So how do you do this? And how do you keep that? And I think there's 3 places that you can start looking at adherence to your architecture, and that's visual looks. So getting someone to do a code review and going to check it. You can have sort of tests in place, and you can also have, compile time testing on that. So there's all these different levels that you can have to make sure that adherence is being met. And it just made sense to me, but I've never seen it done in practice. I'd love to know who's doing this in practice.
Yeah, something to follow around on. I did find the GitHub repository for net arc test.
That's the one.
Based on the Java arc test.
Yeah.
And just that exactly idea of essentially writing assertions that say, here's our architectural rules. I mean, now, I don't want to say that you just want to pop warnings, but certainly when you're writing code, especially new to a project, to have it come back and say, hey, we have an architectural requirement around this, and this code violates it. Mm-hmm. So that at least you're pressing against edges that nobody wanted you to press against.
And it's also documentation, because someone can come and read those tests. Mm-hmm. And, that's the first step of a documentation for your application and your style guide.
Yeah. You're describing intent at that point.
And even the best part is when your architect goes on vacation, it could be sitting on a beach and looking at the results of these tests, and then send an email that says, hey, what are you guys doing?
Stop it now.
Stop that.
Yeah. So it was really interesting to start delving into this world, and it really felt like the Wild West. And my teammates, they're all Spring advocates. So they're very into the distributed systems, very into all of this enterprise architecture. I think Spring has been far ahead of .NET in that respect of pushing that and offering the libraries that support that kind of architecture. So learning from them, and some of them are really big DDD advocates. So trying to dissect what I want from what they say, and the stuff that I don't, which is too far in the DDD realm. It has been really interesting. But it's something I don't hear spoken about. It is the two camps. Stay away from monoliths or stay away from distributed systems. And there's never this in between, which I think is where people should be. I really, really strongly feel that.
Ultimately just to try and make more maintainable projects.
Yeah.
We have to have a new acronym here, JED. JED. Just enough distribution.
That's it. That's a great acronym. I like that.
$50.
Not JIT. That's it. Oh, okay. I don't like it so much now.
Yeah.
No, not my favorite acronym.
You have to join my foundation, and it's $50 a month. Yeah.
Pretty expensive acronym right there.
But it was interesting going through the modular monolith and how you can start implementing so many of these good patterns, such as the asynchronous communication. You can have all of this message brokers implemented into your modular monolith. So you can have all these modules, and how are they speaking to each other? Mm-hmm. By a service bus. Right. So it's interesting that you were bringing up that, because that was something that I worked really hard when I was building out a workshop that used a modular monolith to get the messaging in that sublayer really, really clearly defined, so that people coming into those modules knew that each module could only communicate across a module via the asynchronous messaging, which was really a fun challenge to architect and think about how things were going to go, and
getting away from that synchronous, I am waiting for a response mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just trying to think, well, what does need immediate response? Well, anything user related, and that's all going to be external. And basically anything internal doesn't need an immediate response. So you can offload all of that.
No. Even though the difference between immediate and this is milliseconds.
Yeah.
It's perception.
Right? And it's also an architectural uncoupling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That the returns come from a separate stream than the outputs. I am deeply disturbed that we have spoken this long.
Richard.
And you have not said Kubernetes. Like, what's up?
Hey, I did, but it was
what's
in jest.
going on?
I try to avoid
As
that.
opposed to me, who's very serious, right? Like, I mean, there's another angle to this microservices push, which is it is also selling product, right? And that's annoying too. Like, there's this other set of motivations around this. And I mean, as much as I'm making fun on the whole Kubernetes angles, like, I am talking to more folks who are rehabilitating brownfield monoliths with Kubernetes. That's a form of encapsulation. It's creating new security perimeters. It's making them clean up messy bits of the code. The process of getting it to run well in a container tends to make the product better, the app better in the long run, because it does start to separate out how we do state management, how we do storage. Like, all of those things are good, but it doesn't, you're doing it because you want the software to be more reliable, not because somebody told you containers would save your life.
And I've recently been shown this cool architecture by one of the solution engineers at work, because VMware Tanzu, the bit that I work for, is all about Kubernetes and that kind of system. I don't really delve that deep into it. I'm very much still on the code side. But the type of thing that you can do with Kubernetes, especially with the edge, is fascinating. So I learned a whole new way of architecting systems that is still monolithic, but relies on Kubernetes as a way for engineers to easily distribute their code to edge locations and manage it centrally. And I recently learned about a customer that has thousands of edge locations all running on VMs, and they have to manually go and update each release on that.
Man.
And I'd never thought about that aspect of it. And coming back round to how you can centrally manage that and get things that are low to no code locally, because a lot of these edge locations don't have people who are technical at them, and they may not have constant internet. So having something that can self-heal and manage itself is really, really important. And I'd never appreciated that aspect of Kubernetes. I always thought it was let's go to microservices, let's do this, it's the latest buzzword. But to see how it can work in that type of situation and make a DevOps engineer's life that much easier and automated had never occurred to me. So that was a fascinating thing to learn. And I feel like I'm learning so much these past 2 years, from a difference from being an API developer, coming over to this whole new world of really big enterprise development. It's been a steep learning curve, and I really appreciate people who are in those engineering teams trying to figure this out.
Well, I think important part here is recognizing edge doesn't mean the client machine. Edge might be the CDN closest to the client machine.
Absolutely.
Like, it's just getting into this idea that there's more places than the client and the server to deploy software to. And that you want a sort of unified strategy for saying, okay, I'm going to push this compute closer to the customer, but not on the customer's machine. And I think it's a hard idea to deal with. And, folks who've only ever thought about CDNs think about static images and files that way. And now you're talking about units of compute that could be there, where you don't know necessarily what you're going to do, but you have control over it. It's not exposed to as much security risk, but it is performant.
And making changes is inconsequential, right? I mean, simple.
Well, the mockery of containers has been, hey, I took a fairly complicated set of services in the back end of my server and made them far more complicated, right? Like, just broke them into so many more pieces, so it's just so much more to manage. Not getting into this, hey, it's not all sitting in the same server anymore. It's pushed to all these other places as well. And that was impossible when it was stuck in one location. These are very much ops problems that a lot of developers, I don't think, spend enough time just being aware of what we're trying to do to create good performance for customers. Those asynchronous bits, because the customer's not directly affected by them, mean it doesn't matter that we added latency by pushing that stuff to the edge and the data is going to sync later, because the customer's done. They feel entered their order, they've done their workload, whatever they wanted to do. And eventually, again, measured in seconds, the data sync back to the primary repository, wherever that may be. These are complicated problems, and you don't get to decide them in advance. What you're doing here is building architecture to make those options possible. Right. But don't do it if it's not going to happen, because it's not simple.
No. It's that complexity versus the outcome. And it's something that I always try to stress is everything you add to your application is going to add complexity.
Yeah.
You were talking about service discovery. I speak about service discovery. I've got it in workshops. It's good because, your applications can self-register. You don't have to worry about it. It's all dynamic and it's hands off. But hey, it's an added layer of complexity.
Right. Yeah.
And it's very easy just to go out willy-nilly and add all these new services, these funky things, these features, do all your resume-driven development. And then now you have this horrifically complex application that even the architects don't know what's going on. And it just gets worse and worse. And you get that distributed big ball of mud.
I mean, I wonder if you have to have a service failure where the app's been deployed with, this is the service we call. And then for whatever reason, that service is down and the backup one is up. But because we didn't use the service discovery, we didn't even know it was there. So we're out before you finally justify adding that overall ongoing cost and complexity of service discovery.
Yeah.
It's like you need to feel the pain and have that experience before we value that complexity.
Right.
So if we now got pain-driven development.
That's it.
We've always had that.
Yeah. Well, your resume-driven model is, hey, I've always wanted to build one of these, not that we need one of these. So part of that, that pain piece is recognizing this can cause outages. And so we're going to incur this cost willingly. You think about all the people that are affected by that, right? It's not the development's more difficult. The deployment's more complicated. Ops needs to know about it, to know when these services shift, make sure the security contexts are right. Like, it's a lot of people involved going forward. Testing's more complicated. Like, nothing's free for adding that capability in exchange for avoiding a possible outage effectively. But also, the other scenario that I've seen is we can't deploy, because we need those other guys to update to this new version, to this new service too, before we can deploy. Where when we did buses properly, we don't need to.
And that's where you have, well, that's the worst case scenario, which you see people do, which is that distributed big ball of mud.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So they go from the monolith to that, rather than the monolith to the modular monolith to the microservices. And it's the worst place to be.
The distributed ball of mud. It's not just a ball of mud. It's a ball of mud in multiple time zones.
Layla, what is next for you? What's in your inbox?
Well, I've got quite a lot of events coming up.
I can't imagine.
Just hanging out with people like you two in the meet space, which is always fun. There's quite a few events.
Are we all doing NDC Porto? I think we are.
Yes.
Yep.
And Copenhagen.
We're all doing Copenhagen.
Yeah.
And we're all doing Dev Intersection.
Yeah.
Yes, we
Wow,
are.
cool.
Yeah.
And Richard and I are at DevReach and Poland. I'm basically doing a world tour with you, Richard.
I think you're bombing around together pretty much. Are
We
you going to run
are.
down to DevReach after Poland as well?
Yeah.
We should probably get on the same flights.
Oh, yeah,
that's
because
a
there's
bit
already 3 of us on that flight. So.
Yeah, and we're splitting. I don't like splitting shows like this, but you get into situations.
You do. So yeah, I'm working on the old YouTube content. I've just been on some cool courses learning how to do new awesome stuff with video.
Your streaming keeps getting cooler.
That's great.
Yes.
Yeah.
That streaming is a weird place. I've sort of put a pause on that for a little while. But I do love it. I love just the live coding. So yeah, just doing a whole load of stuff and always learning, always trying to cram more knowledge into this cranium.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Well, that's great. Layla, thanks so much for spending this hour with us. It's been fantastic.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right. We'll see you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Plop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got transmitter banned by the FCC. Yes, I'm a toy boy. Life is hard.